Good morning and welcome to the California Academy of Sciences, the new California Academy of Sciences. I'm Greg Farrington and I have the delight to be executive director of this wonderful box of wonders. For the past 150 years, the Academy has been about two questions: life, how did we get here? And sustainability, how are we going to find a way to stay? Aren't those sort of current topics on people's minds? We have scientists conducting research in areas from beetle evolution to global climate change. We also share what we discover with the public, as you can see on the public floor. I like to call this building the kingdom of wow, since wow is the word heard most frequently as kids of all ages meet real penguins, amazing fish, and all the rest you see around us. We're also great users of Google technology, particularly Google Earth. One of our scientists is mapping the location of all the ants in the world using Google Earth. Now, isn't that something you think about? No, he's not trying to attach a GPS to every ant. He's sort of working in clusters. Academy educators have designed lesson plans for students using Google Earth software. You'll get a chance to see them in action later with real-life fourth graders downstairs. Fourth graders really count, you know. They represent the most important renewable resource known as smart kids. The Academy looks forward to an even greater Google future. After all, we have an enormous red Google pin in front of this building. We have to live up to the challenge. For example, how might we link the content of this building with Google Earth so that people everywhere can visit this museum and access its contents? Our penguins and fish are ready to go global. Along with the rainforest, 20 million specimens of living and extinct species and all that goes with them. How do we make our museum into a virtual big red exclamation point, clickable by the world? Surely Google can figure that out. So, with that challenge, it's wonderful to have you all here. Welcome to WOW. It's now my pleasure to welcome Google CEO, the Chief WOW, Eric Schmidt.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. First, our thanks very much to the California Academy. There is no greater opportunity to see science in action than an organization that in the last 150 years has been dedicated to understanding every interesting thing about the natural world. So it's wonderful to be here. When I think about Google, I think of wow moments, aha moments, things where I go like, wow. So in my case, I've always wanted to climb Mount Everest, right? Now, looking at this, does this look like a Mount Everest? No, not really. So I sit on Google Earth, and I just go right to the top from the safety of my office. Then all of a sudden, I realized the power of the kind of thing that we can do with modern computers, modern imaging, and so forth. When you think, however, about Google Earth, you're missing the majority of the Earth, which is in fact the oceans. And it's all obvious if you think about it in those terms, but it's so difficult to get to. So what we learn, by the way, when we think about Google Ocean, and in fact the ocean in general, is that there's a problem. We actually don't know very much about it. Did you know, for example, that there are 100 metric tons of garbage sitting in a place larger than the state of Texas in the middle of the Pacific? What are we going to do about that? Anyone care? I do. I think we do. Did you know that a majority of CO2 gets reabsorbed into the ocean, and as a result, we have a huge set of problems around climate change, coral reefs, and biodiversity? Did you know that there's more biodiversity in the ocean than there is in the Amazon? I didn't until I got involved in this, and I started learning about the role of the oceans. All of those are my stories that will be repeated by millions of people as they use the platform that is being announced today. It's not just a fun demo. It's not just a narrative. You'll see all of that today, and it is visually stunning. What it really is a platform for science and research and literally understanding the future of the world. It's great to be here, and with that, I'd like to introduce John Hanke, who is the director for all of Google Earth, Oceans, and Maps, and tell us what we're going to do, John.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. So as some of you might have guessed, we are launching a new version of Google Earth today. This will be Google Earth 5, if you're keeping track of the numbers. And it has several new capabilities that I'm very excited about. I just want to describe those briefly right up front. So as you might have gleaned from Eric's remarks, we are extending Google Earth to include the world's oceans, and we're going to be talking quite a bit about that this morning. We're also extending further into space. We're launching a data set that depicts the planet Mars in incredible detail. This data set was developed.
That's another place I wanted to go to.
Well, now you can. And NASA did this with the very latest overhead imagery. There are also these great street view-like images taken from the rovers, these panoramas, and great factoids about the planet. We won't be demoing it here, but it will be available in the room next door for you guys to explore. We're going to enable users to tell stories with Google Earth through a new feature that lets people record a 3D fly-through with annotations and voice descriptions along the way, and then easily share that with other people with a lightweight file. And finally, we're going to introduce the concept of time to Google Earth. We're going to give users the ability to basically go back into time and see historical images, and we're going to show you examples of that. So why are we doing this particular set of things? Part of this is driven by bottoms-up innovation in Google, as is our practice and part of our culture. Part of it's due to some notable outside influences, and we're going to hear from some of those today. But one theme that kind of is the thread here is communications, is storytelling. As Eric talked about, the features that we're going to talk about today are technology, but they're really enablers for people to communicate. And that was a learning for us. When we first launched Google Earth and Google Maps, we thought we knew what people would do with it. We thought people would find restaurants, hotels, maybe plan a vacation, maybe look for a new house. But we found that people were using it, in addition to those things, to communicate about some very important global subjects. Shortly after we launched, Katrina smacked into New Orleans. We got some updated imagery of that and distributed it. It was used for people to understand what was happening in New Orleans, for evacuees to know if their property was destroyed, and even by the Coast Guard to come in and rescue people. We've basically then repeated this for all of the major disasters that have happened since then. We've done it with Ike in the Texas coast. You can see the devastation. Cyclone Nargis as it moved through Myanmar. We also did it with the earthquake that struck China earlier this year. Another great example of Earth as communications platform was done by the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. This was done not by Google, but by a third party. Tremendously powerful layer in Google Earth to visually help inform and educate the world about the atrocities happening in the Darfur region of the Sudan. Where's Darfur? Why should we care? What's really going on there? Incredibly powerful way to communicate. Another good example was done by a group of activists who wanted to publicize what's really happening with these mountaintop removal mining projects. Often these happen away from roadways, they're not really visible to people, and there's absolutely tremendous devastation that Earth does a fantastic job of shining a light on so people can see what's happening. I think my favorite example, though, is a remote tribe that lives in the middle of the Amazon. This is the Seri tribe, and actually, it is a funny juxtaposition, but the chief of this tribe is college educated, found out about Google Earth, and was involved in a very serious, for him, he believes it to be a life or death struggle with illegal loggers who want to encroach on their tribal lands. So he's using Earth to shine a spotlight on what's happening there, to educate the world about his part of the planet. And they're also using it now within the tribe in their efforts to provide some stewardship over their resources within their land. And we sent some Googlers out. This guy on the end here actually is a Googler. Those are temporary tattoos that were applied by the tribe, not real. There's a video of him speaking in Davos this week, and he looks very different in the two videos. But a really great set of examples of how Earth can help communicate important things that are happening around the planet and important things that are happening to the planet. So the first feature that I want to talk about in more detail this morning is this thing called historical imagery. Heretofore, when you use Google Earth, you've only been able to see a single snapshot of a single place on the planet at a given point in time. And as we accumulate more and more images of the world, as we refresh the database, the old images have simply gone away. So in an example of bottoms-up innovation, one of our engineers decided it would be a really good idea if we could expose all that great data. So we built this feature, and I'm incredibly excited about the power that it has. I'm going to show you a quick demo. We can bring up this building. So this is showing Earth now with time mode enabled. And so what we have that's new is this slider up in the left-hand column, on the left-hand side there. And the user can simply drag that forward and play forward in time. So we've gone from the 1940s to recently in 2005 when the lot was leveled and construction began of this building. and then we can take it all the way back up to the present and see what things look like today. So this is one specific place. So this is a technology, but I want to let Eric introduce our next speaker so we can get an idea of what a technology can be in the hands of somebody who has something they want to say.
When I think of courage, the most fundamental thing that we need as a civilization, there is one person who I think is perhaps the most courageous person that I know. It took courage 20 years ago when nobody else wanted to hear to talk about the importance of the earth and the environment. It took courage to listen and get the science right and build the community and get the policy right. It took courage to fight against so many special interests whose interests were local but not global. And this gentleman did this with the power of his office, the power of his personality, and I think in many ways we will all know him in history as the person who saved the earth, the Honorable Vice President Al Gore.
Eric. Thank you very much. Well, that was over the top. You know, many people don't realize that I'm an early adopter of a device that Google Labs has invented, this battery-powered hubris alarm. And I have it set on vibrate, and it was going crazy during your introduction. Thank you very much, Eric. It is such a pleasure for me to join with the Google team and the Google Earth leadership in helping in a small way to launch this fantastic new version of Google Earth. I cannot tell you how impressed I am. I would take a lot of time to do so, except I'm here because I'm excited to hear from Sylvia Earle a little bit later on, because the primary feature among many in this new edition of Google Earth is Google Ocean, and you're going to hear a lot about that. And I hope everybody will look at the Mars 3D and all of the rest as it's demonstrated in the next room. But I want to tell you why I'm so excited about one feature called historical imagery. Also tours, which you'll hear about also. And tours is a Google Earth version of slideshow, and I'm looking forward to that also. But I'd like to begin with just a brief comment about what I view as a really important historical shift that has begun with Google Earth. You know, without realizing it, we use these organizing metaphors to understand the world around us and the information that we're interested in exploring. And at the beginning of the computer age, the organizing metaphor was a desktop. You had essentially a blotter with files, and it was an old metaphor that I don't think works very well. Google Earth uses the Earth itself as an organizing metaphor, not only for visual imagery, but for all of the imagery, historical, scientific, cultural, everything you can think of, organized geospatially, because it makes more sense. It's easier to use. And for all those people out there who are using Google Earth, it's just exciting to explore the world at your own pace and go as deep into every field of knowledge as you want to, as this fabulous Google Earth team led by John Hanke and Marissa Mayer over at Google proper. It's an amazing team, and they keep on adding new layers of meaning. Now, to historical imagery. When I first started giving my slideshow on the climate crisis, I noticed a big change about 10 years ago when I was first able to collect painstakingly a series of images of glaciers all around the world that are disappearing and retreating. But in most cases, it involved a lot of digging to get some before and after pictures. With the new version of Google Earth and its historical imagery feature, you can do that in a much more compelling way. One of the sets of two images that I used was from Glacier National Park. And I went there, hiked up to the top of the largest glacier in Glacier National Park, Grinnell Glacier. And as some of you know, the scientists are telling us that within the next 10 to 15 years, this will be known as the park formerly known as Glacier. Unfortunately, the glaciers are disappearing. Here we're zooming in on Glacier National Park, and we're zooming in further on the Grinnell Glacier, which is to the left of center there, and you'll see that big lake. Now, here we are in 1991, not that long ago. And as the historical imagery proceeds, we'll go from 91, I think, to 93, and you'll just see the retreat of the glacier. And you can see this with a lot of glaciers around the world. There are very few of them that are counter to this trend. And of course, one of the most ominous results of it is in the Himalayas. Here we are in 95. 1.4 billion people get more than half of their drinking water from the regular glacial melting pattern in the Himalayas. Here we are in 2003, and it will go in the next image to 2005. And then in the manner of Google Street View, you'll get Google Glacier View that'll come around and show you the dramatic difference just in the last few years. Here we are in 2005, and you can see, we started with this image, but you can see the contrast from the 91 image to this one, and now it'll zoom around and you'll see the peak as you see it from the lodge that is at Glacier National Park. And those who have visited it in the past are really startled to see how different this Grinnell Glacier looks now. It's practically not even a glacier anymore. When I was there not that many years ago, that whole area was completely covered with ice. I walked where a lot of that water is now. The pool had already begun to form, but now you can see it's virtually gone. This is an extremely powerful educational tool, and this year, as the world moves toward the pivotal conference in Copenhagen in December, one of my fondest hopes is that people around the world will use Google Earth to see for themselves the reality of what's happening because of the climate crisis. And I just want to close by expressing tremendous gratitude to the Google Earth team. A lot of dedication has gone into all the work that has resulted in putting these new layers of meaning in there. So congratulations, Google Earth, on 5.0.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gore. We very much appreciate the work that you're doing. I wanted to say one thing a lot of people may not know about Vice President Gore. While he was Vice President, sponsored some work at NASA to create a digital Earth. And this was very important work that actually had a direct influence on the later development of Google Earth. And a lot of people don't know that. So now I want to talk about the ocean. So we are extending the map of the world to include the ocean parts of the planet as well as the land parts. This was done with the help of a lot of partners. There's a specific data set that depicts the bathymetry of the world's oceans. It's comprised of over 50 million separate measurements of the height of the undersea mountains, the shape and contours of the undersea canyons. We've also laid on top of that more than 20,000 points describing ocean life. Much of it with pictures and videos showing creatures that live there, scientists going about their work and explaining what's happening in the ocean and what's happening to the ocean, sometimes as a result of human influence. Sylvia is going to join me and she's going to talk about this. Before Sylvia comes up here, I wanted to say just a word about how we got started on this path. So about 3 years ago, I guess, Sylvia and I were in a forum a little bit like this. It was a press forum, and we were both talking about different things. And I said something, of course, about Google Earth, and then Sylvia got up to talk, and she was supposed to speak about ocean things, but she started praising Google Earth. Her remarks were that she loved this product and that she loved the fact that children could use it to explore the planet and learn about the planet. But then she turned to me with kind of an evil grin and said, but you should really think about renaming it, maybe Google Dirt. because you've forgotten about 2/3 of the planet, and I don't think you're finished yet. So that kind of got under my skin. Because she was right. I mean, we had worked as hard as we could to build this depiction of the planet, but we had been kind of blind to the ocean. I heard a quote recently from Marshall McLuhan, which resonated in my mind. The quote was, "First we shape our tools, and then our tools shape us." And the idea is that if we sort of mistakenly omit this important part of the planet, that might have a bad effect. So I thought the best way to convince people that maybe this was a good idea was just to bring Sylvia in to meet the team and let her talk, and she did that. She came several times, and she energized many people on the Google Geo team to begin working in their 20% time to try to make this happen. And they worked as a side project for about a year and a half, and then recently we staffed it as a full project and finished it. So Sylvia, I should say a couple of words about your sort of formal background. Sylvia, of course, is a world-renowned oceanographer. She's a National Geographic Explorer in Residence. She was a former chief scientist for NOAA. She's written extensively about the ocean, including a recent beautiful National Geographic Atlas of the Ocean with Linda Glover, who's also here this morning, which was designated as hot in Wired this month, which I think is a huge achievement for an atlas. So congratulations. But Sylvia is one of the first women ever trained to use scuba gear. She's a veteran of over 60 expeditions. She spent more than 6,000 hours underwater. She set a record for the deepest solo dive to 1,000 meters. She's just an incredibly inspiring person, and she got this all started. And at this point, I consider her a very good friend. So Sylvia, please come up.
Talk about a dream coming true. It was such a throwaway comment, Google Dirt. And John, I hope someday you finish it. Like, there's the planet, what about the blue? But here we are, 3 years later, and now anyone in just a few minutes can compress what it's taken me 50 years to understand, and that is that the ocean really matters. That, in fact, the world is blue. There's a lot of talk these days about thinking green, but you have to remember that without the blue, there couldn't be any green. I think a little bit of poetry, or at least a comment from a poet, W.H. Auden, that many, thousands have lived without love, none without water. It's actually in the ladies' room here at the California Academy of Sciences. So let's see this fantastic new rendition of the Earth. I have enjoyed splashing around in the oceans of the world, using scuba, living underwater for weeks at a time, used submarines, about 30 variations on the theme of little submarines, gone deeper than I could go as a diver. I want to show you right now on Google Earth how it is laid out, basically, with Explore the Ocean. You can see the surface in a new way. You can actually look and find those little blue dots. I said to John in the beginning, if we could just have people see what it's like to be underwater, not just look at the surface, but to imagine with little images, little places that you could touch. And there are now about a dozen places to get overviews in focus areas. But this one really is like Oceans 101 to tell people what it took me most of my lifetime to understand, that scientists over the last 50 years have learned more about the ocean than during all preceding history, at a time when literally more has changed than during all preceding history. And knowing that most of the oxygen that we breathe comes from the sea, that the water cycle is driven by the ocean. 97% of Earth's water is ocean. It shouldn't be a surprise, since life depends first and foremost on water, that about 97% of the biosphere is ocean. And we are so terrestrially oriented as Earth creatures as primates. But to be able to do this, touch a dot, and see some of the creatures that actually live in the part of the planet that is dominated by water. To actually be a turtle for a while. It took a long time for me to get to see a turtle underwater personally. Now any little kid can do it geo-referenced in a place such as the Galapagos Islands. Or how about coming to our backyard here in California, the Monterey Canyon. On the wall at NOAA, when I was there as chief scientist, there was a map of Monterey Bay from 1857. No canyon was visible. They didn't know of the existence of this magnificent feature. Again, now, everyone, everywhere, using Google Earth, can see not just the mountains on the land, but to take the plunge, go down, and not just wing your way over the surface, although that's pretty cool all by itself, to see that liquid moving surface. You're a seagull now, flying along. And you have the option with Google Earth 5.0 of becoming a dolphin. Splash! Yay, there we are. Woo! Steve Miller is somewhere in the audience, probably more than any other single Googler. He's devoted days and nights, not 20% time, more like 200% time, along with many of the other crafty engineers who work at Google who dreamed of how do we make the ocean? How do you be a dolphin, take a breath, go back under? And if you are a dolphin in Monterey Bay, chances are you'd be looking for lunch. You'd be using sonar. You know, it doesn't really look this way when you're in a submarine or diving, but it looks pretty much that way to a dolphin. They see the big picture with their sonar, and it's sonar, of course, that has given us this amazing view of Monterey Bay and other places under the sea. But when you go on Google Earth, you go and look for those little blue dots and see creatures that the many contributors have been able to add to the underwater part of Google Earth. That Vampyroteuthis is a wonderful creature. But let's go look at one of the longest creatures on the planet, this beautiful siphonophore. I mean, creatures that most people didn't even know existed 50 years ago, even 30 years ago. What else are we going to find now that we have new ways of exploring the ocean? I mean, less than 5% has been seen, let alone explored. There's a lot more that we'll be adding to this version of Google, I hope, going forward. Or how about becoming a great white shark for a while? Here with Barbara Block and her project, the top program, Tagging Ocean Giants. You can not just look on the surface and see where they go. That's been possible for quite a while, but let's go underwater, not just across the ocean, but specifically where that great white shark traveled over that terrain. I mean, what a concept to be able to see what they see and in broad strokes understand the nature of why do they go along that particular route? Are there features of the sea floor? Are there temperature features? What is it that makes sharks and turtles and tunas and other creatures follow those specific pathways? Well, now some of these things are beginning to come together to be able to look at the ocean, literally, with new eyes. This is one of my favorite parts of the ocean, the Gulf of Mexico. That's where, as a little kid, I first personally took the plunge, and I have association with the Heart Research Institute right now in Corpus Christi, Texas, up along the coast. A lot of people think that the Gulf of Mexico is just mud and oil rigs, but if you use Google Earth now, you can see that it is richly populated with creatures. Here you can drop in on some of these guys having lunch, or I love this feature, to be able to look at the sea surface temperature. You can track the impact of temperature on how it influences the generation of storms. You can see, using this daily updated temperature of the Earth, to see how phenomena such as El Nino and La Nina form, something that really first came together in the early 1990s, to see how the atmosphere and the ocean are so closely coupled. But here, again, there's a tool that not just sober scientists and not just a few people in offices or laboratories, but the whole world can use this as a way to know the whole world. They can zip down to Patagonia, one of the richest places on the planet for ocean wildlife, on the land too, but it's also one of the most threatened. And speaking of having lunch, you can see and share the view of these great creatures having lunch. Amazing. Little adventures like that are all over this new version of Google Earth. 50 years ago, when Cousteau first started taking the plunge himself and sharing his view of the ocean, I read Silent World. I was absolutely entranced. I just knew I had to do something like that. But nobody at that time, not Jacques Cousteau, not Rachel Carson, certainly not Sylvia Earle, did we have any clue about our power to alter the nature of the ocean. We didn't know that in 50 years, 90% of the big fish would be gone. We didn't know that there would be on the order of 300 dead zones around the ocean. We didn't know that we had the capacity to alter the nature of the living world. 50 years ago, we hadn't taken the plunge yet to the deepest part of the ocean. That didn't take place actually until, well, actually it took place in 1960, almost 50 years ago, 49 years ago, as of the 23rd of January of this year. But first, before we take that deep plunge, let's go see a creature that I tried to see while I was here at the California Academy of Sciences in 1975. John McCosker's in the audience. He led the expedition. We dived day and night, especially at night, 200 feet down along the Mozambique Channel, hoping to encounter a coelacanth, a fish that has been around on the planet on the order of 300 million years. Archive, this wonderful organization based in England that is documenting creatures that we hope will be around on into the future, not just as images, but with care, we'll have the real thing. Now, let's zoom to the deep part of the ocean that only one person, two people have been to once in the history of the planet. We can go see the Mariana Trench, recently acquired as a part of a new national monument, designated just, there you go. I mean, who wouldn't want to do this? Don't you want to go and see what it's like? 7 miles down, you fly 7 miles overhead. Some of you did getting here, but to go 7 miles down is still a really big deal. A really big deal, considering. Pardon? Yeah, oh, okay. It took 8 hours for the Trieste, the vehicle that you're about to see in 3D mock-up, thanks to another little trick that Google has been able to create. Imagine that you're there where it's totally dark except for the flash, sparkle, and glow of living light creatures that occupy the dark. I sometimes say that, you know, most of life on Earth lives in the dark. They do. You get below 1,000 feet, it's dark all the time. Not just in Washington, D.C. It's out there in the ocean, you know. And they get by in the ocean somehow without the presence of light that we take so much for granted. The world keeps moving around. But it has changed. These little golden spots on Google Earth mark some of the largest of the marine protected areas that have been designated in recent times. It's an idea that really started in this country, like national parks. Some say national parks were the best idea America ever had, and we do have quite a few of them, but just in the last 3 years, about 340,000 square miles of ocean have been added to protected areas for this country and for the world, places where even the fish are safe. It seems like such a good idea. In fact, in the audience, we have representatives from IUCN who have been working on a global map. It's up there right now on Google Earth of all the marine protected areas in the world. some 4,000 of them. It's really good news. The bad news is that you really have to look hard to find them. That they're tiny places except for a few places, such as the Great Barrier Reef. But here's the thing, the Great Barrier Reef, when it started, we thought, the Marine Park Authority, that maybe 5% of the barrier reef would be enough to protect from destructive fishing and the like, that they could keep the big motor running with 5%. Well, it wasn't working. They've upped it to 33%. 33% of the barrier reef is now fully protected, where even the fish and the lobsters and the shrimp and all the little guys that make the world work, make the barrier reef work, that they're safe. The rest is sort of open for business. If we continue business as usual on the 99% of the ocean that is not protected in one way or another, think of what the consequences will be in your lifetime, in the lifetime of your kids, your grandkids. I'm so pleased that there are places that we are beginning to lock away. Not lock away, but really to protect. I think of the ocean as the blue heart of the planet. And you should ask yourself, how much of your heart do you want to protect? Presently, it's, well, before the new monuments were established, it was 0.6 of 1% of the world was protected as a park, a reserve, someplace where there was a kind of protection for the creatures who live there, our life support system. Now it's 0.8 of 1%. Still not quite enough to maintain the integrity of the natural systems that keep us alive. Now we know. Now we can understand that the ocean drives climate and weather, shapes planetary chemistry, gives us the oxygen, most of it, that we breathe. If we shut down the big ocean systems, it is our life support system. It's our future that is going to be in jeopardy. I love the fact that Google Mars is being launched about the same time that the ocean is being featured in Google Earth, because the contrast is so striking. If you think about going someplace else to live, most people think, well, let's go set up housekeeping in Mars. Good luck. We can probably have an outpost there, but it's not going to support 7 billion of us. We're having a hard enough time getting this planet to function in a way that is going to keep 7, 8, 9, 10 billion people alive and well. So, I invite you, I implore you to download 5.0 and dive in. This is the moment, as never before, that we know we've got a problem. With knowing comes caring. And with caring, there is hope that we will find a place for ourselves within the largely blue planet that keeps us alive. Now that we know, we can act, but there isn't much time. I have one of my children in the audience. She has 2 children. I have 4 grandsons. I just imagine them saying, a few years out, why didn't you do something when you knew what the problems were, while there still was time, while there still were sharks and bluefin tuna and coral reefs? Well, the whole world is about to know in new ways, and I really salute Google, all the Googlers with their 20% time or their 200% time, days and nights, weeks, months, making this happen. John Hanke, I really thank you for not just saying, what was that, when I gave you a little punch 3 years ago. I thank DOER for taking this challenge of coordinating the early stages of it. National Geographic for backing me and backing this whole project from the get-go. And the mighty assemblage of advisors and their institutions, the Navy, NASA, everyone. It's like the light has come on. Yes, we need to have the ocean in Google Earth. What a concept. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.
So I hope you're getting the message that this is not about technology for technology's sake. It's about communicating and learning and building tools to facilitate that. And we're very excited to be able to do that in a small way. I did want to take a minute to acknowledge the partners that have worked on this content. And I want to stress that it is really deep. There's so much to explore. Harriet Nemo traveled all the way over from the UK to be here today. She heads up Archive, this amazing nonprofit that's collecting still images and video of all the world's endangered species on land and in water, and their information is very much a part of this. Julie Packard at the Monterey Bay Aquarium has been very supportive. Jane Lubchenko of Oregon State, and has now been appointed to be the new NOAA administrator, was part of our advisory board, and she couldn't be here today. She's prepping for her hearings, but she's been incredibly helpful with the marine protected areas. Retired Admiral Tim McGee of the U.S. Navy is here. Admiral McGee started us off with the Navy to work together with Scripps and with NOAA and others on this bathymetric project, and it couldn't have happened without you, Admiral McGee. Thank you very much. Dr. Richard Spinrad of NOAA, I think, is here today. He heads up scientific research inside of NOAA. NOAA's been collaborating with us very closely on this. Scripps Oceanographic, Woods Hole, the IUCN, Sylvia mentioned the Hart Institute, the Census of Marine Life, many, many partners. So I want to thank you. I want to say to the press today that many, many of these people are here today, and the goal is to let you talk to them, and our goal is to provide a platform to help them tell their stories. So thank you, partners. There's one other person I want to bring up here to talk, and this is Terry Garcia, who's Executive Vice President of Mission Programs at National Geographic. Terry wanted to be a part of Google Ocean from the beginning. He's worked closely with Sylvia for a number of years. Terry wanted to bring to bear this great archive of incredible video and incredible images that the National Geographic has to help Sylvia get her message about the oceans out there. Really, I'm going to abbreviate your biography, Terry. The thing that you need to know about him is he does the fun stuff at National Geographic. So he's in charge of mission programs, which means expeditions and science, the thing that you think about when you think about National Geographic. So Terry, if you could come up and say a few words, I would appreciate it. Terry Garcia.
Thanks, John. You know, we all have that recurring nightmare where you dream that you have this big test and you're unprepared for it. I'm adding to my suite of nightmares the one where I'm invited to speak and I have to follow the Vice President and Sylvia, Earle. So, John, I really want to thank you for that. Hopefully I can return the favor sometime. As John said, we wanted to be involved in this project, and it was a natural for us. In fact, why we haven't come to this partnership sooner, I don't know, but I can tell you that I see a number of great things for us in the future. When my organization was formed, when National Geographic was formed 121 years ago, the founders stated its mission as to increase and diffuse geographic knowledge. Now, to most of us, that sounds a little off. You know, it's a quaint sort of 19th century formulation, but these guys knew exactly what they wanted to do, and that was they were going to explore, and they were going to fill in what Joseph Conrad called the blank spaces of delightful mystery on the maps. And that's what we've done for the last 120 years or so through scientists, explorers, photographers, writers. We've sent them out and they've come back and they've reported on their findings. And now it's you know, sometimes it's tempting for us to think that we've done it all now. We have explored everything there is to explore. It's tempting because a tourist today can fly to virtually any place on the planet. And we have, through satellites, mapped pretty much every square inch, or so it seems. But there are still places out there that we have not explored, believe it or not. There are still mysteries that have not been answered. And all you have to do, in fact, is look at any map. Look at Google Earth, and you see that there is this vast area of blank space. And it's what Sylvia had referred to. Sylvia, by the way, is someone who has worked with National Geographic for many years, but she's also someone who inspired me. In fact, she took me on my first checkout dive, and she's had me hooked ever since then. Anyway, National Geographic first sponsored its first ocean expedition 75 years ago when William Beebe and Otis Barton, in a tiny little sphere, the bathysphere, went down some 3,000 feet, the deepest dive that man had ever attempted and come back alive. And that record stood for some 15 years. And since then, we've worked with scientists and explorers all over the world and sponsored some 900 expeditions in the oceans. Now, Google Ocean, for us, is going to be an important platform for showcasing many of the remarkable scientists and photographers and explorers that we have. Through this platform, we're going to be able to tap into much of that talent. If you open up in the new ocean folder in the layers panel of Google Earth, you can turn on the Explore the Ocean layer and interact with National Geographic video and the nationalgeographic.com, as well as our various television programs, including Wild Chronicles, but also take a look at some of the remarkable photographs of photographers like Brian Scarry, David Dubélé, Paul Nicklin, Franz Lonting. You can pull up the National Geographic magazine quiz layer and test yourself on ocean-related articles and ideas. You can also view 7 of the dynamic map overlays from the new Atlas of the Ocean that Sylvia and Linda have just co-authored. In exploring this content on Google Ocean, you can also learn about the lives of humpback whales in the Hawaiian Islands Sanctuary, how fish really see and interpret the vibrant colors of coral reefs, and what conservationists are doing these days to protect the Chesapeake Bay. You can also, through the Explore the Ocean introductory videos, learn key points about this vital ecosystem. It's narrated by Sylvia. Sylvia inspired these videos, and so you can share in her knowledge and her passion by just clicking on one of those icons. And by the way, this is just the beginning. You saw a little animation of the Trieste. What we hope to do in the coming years is to launch a series of expeditions, continuing that tradition that we've had, and take you to some of those places that we have yet to explore. Maybe even go to the Mariana Trench, Sylvia. But you'll be able to ride along with us on Google Oceans. And so it's an exciting opportunity. Now there's just one last point that I would like to make if I could, and that is that over the years, the countless numbers of photographers and scientists and explorers have come through my office on their way out into the field in search of their particular truth. And with almost no exception, they come back as conservationists, because the truth that they're finding in their exploration, in their research, in their travels, is that things are slipping away, the natural, cultural, historical resources of this planet. And nowhere is it more obvious than the ocean. Nowhere is the loss more apparent. Google Ocean, this new platform in Google version 5, is going to allow us to take the public and show people what exactly is happening, as well as to hopefully engage them so that we can begin to reverse some of these losses. So thank you very much.
Yeah, this idea that part of the planet is still unexplored is tremendously exciting to us that work on the mapping side, and we're very excited to ride along and collect some new data on some of the forthcoming expeditions. I want to bring up my boss, Marissa Mayer, who's Vice President for Search Products. She's in charge of all of the mapping and geoproducts as well, to talk a little bit about why Google does these kind of innovative, sometimes crazy sounding things, and to introduce our final guest this morning. Marissa, please.
Thanks, John. Back in April, I visited Australia for the first time, and en route to our Sydney office, I took a day of vacation and snorkeled the Great Barrier Reef. Later, relaying the experience to our engineers in the Sydney office, we got into a spirited discussion about how climate change is bleaching some of the world's coral. And one of the engineers relayed to me that he was very excited about how ocean could educate users about the effect of climate change on the underwater environments. And I looked at him rather puzzled for a moment, because ocean is actually an internal code name for an entirely different project. And he realized that I was confused and stopped and explained that, oh, I don't mean ocean, I mean Google Ocean, a 20% project to visualize the world's oceans on Google Earth. And I was immediately very excited about it. I'm even more excited about it to see it today. But I really think that the reason this anecdote is interesting is because it shows how some of these things come about at Google and why we do them. We actually think that some of the most interesting and innovative work that we produce comes through bottoms-up initiatives of people working on what they're most passionate about. Certainly, we have a very strong mission and we have a very strong strategic framework, but that framework leaves room for bottoms-up initiatives where people get to work on what they care about most. Be that scanning the world's books, or working on machine translation to unlock the power of the internet for all languages, or building a new browser that tries to make the web faster and better. And our geo products are no exception. Earth, Maps, Street View, and Sky are all examples of how small teams with a lot of passion have brought about amazing, innovative changes. When you look at, for example, Maps satellite view, it was built by a few engineers thinking about how we could take our keyhole data that we had acquired and visualize it on Google Maps. Google Street View, which was our fastest growing product Google-wide in 2008, started as a Stanford University research project. Google Earth for the iPhone was built by a few iPhone enthusiasts in their 20% time, and upon release within a few days was the #1 downloaded app in every country on the Apple iTunes store. And Google Sky got started when Chikai Hozama, one of our lead product managers and technical leads, asked, why don't we have Google Earth for stars? And today's release really answers that question for the ocean. Why don't we have Google Earth for the ocean? And I think this release really illustrates the power of passion and how that can really work to delight our users and fulfill their needs. And it also shows how a beautiful visualization can inspire hobbyists to ultimately conceive their data in an entirely new way. And this morning's launch demonstrates that this goes far beyond hobbyism to highlight some of the most important causes we face, climate change and how to react to it. I want to take this opportunity to thank the Google Earth team for their passion in building Google Earth 5 and Google Ocean, and also thank the passion of our partners in building this product and helping us celebrate the launch here today. We have one more partner that we get to hear from today. He's been a longtime friend of the oceans, be it mixing his passion for the oceans with his music, recording songs like Son of a Sailor and Cheeseburger in Paradise, and also co-founding the Save the Manatees Club and starting and funding the Singing for Change Foundation. Please help me welcome to the stage multi-platinum recording artist, Jimmy Buffett.
I hope that's will hold there. It's indeed a pleasure to be here and introduce in such glowing terms. And I've never stood behind a lectern with bubbles in it before. I was sitting out there thinking a little bit as the energy is obvious in this room that I'm in the middle of putting together the production for our next tour, which we're going to show you a little bit that I'm kind of excited about. And this, again, came out of being invited to the Google Musicians Lunch several months ago and figuring out that I detected it's like finding that rare conch pearl in 1 in 10,000 in the ocean. I found a lot of parrot heads amongst you Googlers out there. So it dawned on me that your parents, because you're a lot younger than I am in this thing, have raised you on my music, so thank you, parents, for raising your Googlers on music, because it really seems to, in the world is changing as fast as it is. It's obvious that you have your thumb on the pulse of what's going on. And as somebody who started out as a shameless performer from the Gulf Coast And 40 years later, I'm still out here humming along on this wave. I'm feeling pretty good about it. And to come into contact with ways and imaginations that in the world of making people aware of what's going on the planet, I simply do it subtly in my songs to try to create, and I have over the years, just my natural and authentic feelings about having grown up as a child of the swamp in Mobile, Alabama, and exploring the oceans. And you know, I was more proud of being in National Geographic in an article many years ago than I ever was in Rolling Stone. You know, I was one of those kind of guys. And I think back because I hope some of the historical clips that Vice President Gore talked about don't go back to me, because I had some rather historical moments here in this park. I'd like to not see 64 roll around, please. But it's an amazing thing that historically music has always kind of gone along with people who explore. And I get wonderful stories about tapes of mine that actually were exchanged on expeditions or people crossing single-handed voyages of the ocean and changing the changes in latitudes for a son of a sailor. And that gets me as excited, and I get those, as they say in Hawaii, chicken skin things going, and goose pimples to those who don't know. That my music is somehow has related to people and been a part of expeditions and a part of the way people who are making change on the planet are thinking. And a long time ago, I remember when we started the Save the Manatee committee in Florida, I just did it because it was a simple thing to me that I saw Tom Brokaw do an NBC piece on manatees, and I go, why is this problem existing that they're being, it's our intrusion as a species and population that is causing the problem, and if we can make people simply aware of that, that may be an avenue in which to make some changes. And what I discovered was that down the road, I was more able to do it with music because I got their children, not people my age. And when you start at that level, that's where you tend to make change. And that's what's so exciting to me about learning Google, learning the Earth as somebody who's been on it for a while now, to see what it can do for generations coming. And what we have done after our wonderful musicians' lunch was, I said, you know, I play by the water a lot, and I think there's nothing certainly wrong with that. I don't know anybody on this planet that wouldn't want to go to a tropical climate for a week, particularly in this time of the year. But along with it, as Terry said, if people go on expeditions, you come back as conservationists. I feel truly the same thing about that when you see people that go on vacation or searching for Margaritaville. Everybody's got their own version of it, but they come back. There's a little more to it than just the party, and I've always tried to keep that in what I did. So when Google came to me, and Eric, actually this idea was conceived on a boat down in the French West Indies not too long ago, and with the speed in which they put it together, it's just fascinating to me, and I'm so happy to be a part of it, because what we've simply done, we've embedded a little bit of the Margaritaville seaside culture. When you're out there working on your hard expeditions and trying to save the planet, you might need a beer every now and then, or a place to go sit and enjoy a view of the ocean. So I think we can roll it right now. And again, I just wanted to thank everybody for allowing me to be part of Google. So here we go. We're going to Hawaii on tour, and this is in February of this year.
Margaritaville, Hawaii, that's what it is.
So I put a few of my favorite spots up there, and then the Googlers. I love this, and I played it for my 14 and 16-year-old who, you know, they're more into the Kings of Leon than they are me. And they went, wow, this is cool, Dad. So I've never been to a show this way before. I don't know about you, but. But we're going to come up here, and this is where we're going next week. We're in Maui on the 26th of May, and we can zoom into the venue here. But we're going to do also on our tour for the summers. We're going to put a few cameras on the bus so that you can go backstage, ride the bus into certain parts of the tour. Certain parts you will not be allowed in. Still that code of the road thing out there, you know. But it's an amazing thing because if you've been to our shows and you know that there is sort of a large party associated with these concerts, and for people to be able to connect up and see people and be able to kind of get in touch. It's a very cool thing. And what we're doing today is announcing all of the dates. It's going up on YouTube today and then over on our Margaritaville.com website so that everybody will know where we're going. And you can go buy your tickets or listen to that video up there. But years ago, there was a store in Washington, D.C. before Google Earth ever existed. You only could go to like a few places that actually were geography-based stores, and there was a bumper sticker that simply said, "Without geography, you are nowhere." And I've lived by that motto for a long time. And now I know where I am, thanks to Google. This is Breakwater in Maui, which if anybody's ever gone over there to learn to surf, this is where you can learn to surf in a day or your money back. And again, there's the fun aspect of it, but it also is the fact that when people, I believe, have this experience, then they get connected more to the ocean and figure out what they can do to participate in making sure that it's still here and we can do something about all the impact that humans have on it. One of my favorite spots right under the lighthouse in Diamond Head is this is actually where Mark Twain surfed when he went to Hawaii. So if you've ever read that, I'd love to put this up on the site of Twain's description of surfing. Is quite funny. And we'll be over, there's beautiful Diamond Head, and then the Waikiki Shell, we're there on the 28th. And then every day we're going to kind of put updates up on YouTube of what's going on at the shows and who's there, and keep connected with. So if you're out on an expedition in the Mariana Trench, you can plug in and see what's happening at our tour. There, Will a Hula Girl never heard anything, and truly one of my favorite places to go, which again everybody now can plug into. You know, you can start the experience whether you're at the show or not on Google. So we're very, very happy about that. And I wish we were going to stay longer in Hawaii, but we have to go back to the mainland. And we're also, Eric has kindly, on my little seaplane, we're going to plug some cameras in so you'll get to see, as I travel around the Caribbean and the sites I go, you're going to see the travels of Jimmy by his little camera on board the seaplane. So this is kind of interesting, and again, I think fun, but also makes people simply aware of the impact that we have and what we need to do to preserve this beautiful planet and this blue heart. So there we are, and I thought I might play a little song after that, and I was over there frantically working during somebody's speech about trying to reinvent myself on the spot, which has been okay, and I believe I've worked us into this song, and I thought this was apropos for this to be here in this park, which I've loved so much from my early San Francisco days, to be a part of a great number of people dedicated at all levels to a simple fact of living a little better on our planet. So. I love these bubbles. As the son of a sailor, I went out on the sea for adventure, expanding the view of the captain and crew like a man just released from indenture. As a dreamer of dreams and a traveling man, well, I've chalked up many of mine. Read dozens of books by heroes and crooks. Hell, I learned much from both of their style. Son of a son, son of a son, son of a son of a sailor, son of a gun, load the last ton, one step ahead of the jailer. Now way in the near future, southeast of disorder, well, you can shake the hand of the mango man as he greets you at the border. And the lady, she hails from Trinidad, island of the spices, with salt for your meat, cinnamon sweet. Hey, the rum is for all your good vices. You've got to haul the sheet in as we ride on the wind that our forefathers harnessed before us. Hear the bells ring as the tide rigging sings. It's the son of a gun of a chorus. I think you'll see those bubbles on our stage this summer. I don't know. So where this all ends, I can't fathom, my friends. The world is in such commotion. So I'll cruise along, humming the songs while I keep in touch with Google Earth and ocean. Son of a son, son of a son, son of a son of a sailor. It worked, yeah. The sea's in my veins, my tradition remains. I'm just glad I don't live in a trailer. We'll see this version on YouTube real quick, won't we, Cliff? Thank you very much. Thank you, Eric. All right. Thank you, John. All right, appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome. I think we're gonna skip this.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
That's what you want?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's good. So Terry Garcia, you got your wish. I now have to take the stage after a rock star. So, yeah. Yeah, it's all you. Thank you very much. But I'm going to make sort of an executive decision here. We were going to do some Q&A here, but we've actually run over time a little bit with some of the storytelling and so on this morning. So I think what I'd like to propose is that we adjourn next door. There aren't any margaritas over there, unfortunately. Eric, you didn't spring for that, but there's some water, some good water, and some snacks. So I'd like to do that. We're all going to be over there. The science partners, the advisory board people are going to be there. We got a ton of people from the Google Earth team. They're going to be there. It's a great chance for you guys to ask these guys questions about, men and women questions about, how does products like this get built and so on. So I want to thank all of you guys for coming this morning. And let's go next door and talk some more and see some demos.